Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. People popping in. Hi. Welcome. Hello, everyone. I am just buying a little bit of time here as you trickle in and we get some more people in our webinar here. Welcome. Thank you for attending. We're super excited to have you all here. Great. Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm gonna get us started. Welcome everybody. Thank you for attending our webinar here. We're super excited to have you all. This is our second one we're doing this summer, and we have more coming your way. So thanks for joining us right now. I'm going to give us a little idea of what we'll talk about today, and within that, I will introduce myself, and you will get some introductions from the others joining me here on this panel. They will share a little bit about transitioning to college as it relates to their office, which is the Office of Student Accessibility. They'll talk about some process and deadlines, some things to get started on this summer, and then there will be time at the very end for any questions that you have if you want to ask. There's a little option to click on a Q&A. You're welcome to type in questions into that Q&A at any point throughout this webinar. We have a few people here on this panel, so sometimes while one person is talking, you might think of a question. Feel free to drop it in there when you think of it. We might answer it during the webinar, or we might wait till the end to share out an answer. And as we get those answered, those will become public so that others can see. If it's more of a private question, you're welcome to let us know that it's more of a private question, and we can answer those privately and not have those shared with the whole group. So that being said, I will get us started with just introducing myself and who I am, and then I will kick it over to my lovely friends here today. So my name is Melanie McManaman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the coordinator of the first year experience. So hopefully you're receiving some of our emails over this summer. We will be communicating with all of you first year and transfer students, new incoming students throughout the summer. Every Sunday, you'll get an email from us once you've created your Lewis and Clark email account. If you haven't, go ahead and do that. And you can find an archive of all of those emails online as well. We're kind of like your one-stop shop to answer a bunch of these questions when it comes to all of your checklist items and things that you're getting done this summer before you come to campus. So if you're not sure where to start, we're a great office to start with. And then if we don't have the answer for you or you need to speak with another office, we'll be able to get you connected to that office. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie and Katie.
Thank you, Melanie. So the Office of Student Accessibility actually serves all three campuses at Lewis and Clark, undergrad, grad, and law. And our mission is to provide accommodations, education, consultation, and advocacy for students with disabilities. In addition, we also support the campus-wide community with accessing disability-related resources to support students. So what that looks like is a lot of individualized appointments with students and follow-up communication, as well as just answering questions and collaborating with staff and faculty across campus in support of students' accessibility. So I'm Katie McFadden. I'm the director of OSA, and I've worked at LC for about 10 years. In my current role, I'm also the director of the College Advising Center. And our team in OSA includes 3 other staff members, as well as graduate and undergraduate student workers. Rebecca Brooks, next to me in the photo with the blue shirt there, is our associate director. She's been a part of OSA for over 20 years, and her areas of expertise include accessible educational materials. And then next to Rebecca is Carolyn Thompson, who's our administrative specialist. She works on the logistics around implementation of accommodations and exams. And then Stephanie, I'll pass it off to Stephanie to introduce herself and kind of take it from here with a few more slides.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So I'm Stephanie Timey Mandel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Associate Director at OSA. I have been working here for almost 3 years now, but I am also a graduate of both the undergraduate and the graduate school at Lewis and Clark. So even though I've only been working here in a professional capacity for a couple years now, Lewis and Clark has been a part of my life for almost 20 years now, which is crazy. So before I worked at Lewis and Clark, I was a school psychologist in K-12 schools, like public schools, for 7 years. So I have had the chance to see both sides of supporting students with disabilities in both high school and college. And I love getting to do this webinar specifically because I think that, you know, the transition from high school to college as a student with a disability can be kind of confusing and complex and mystifying. So I love being able to like improve access to information and clarity around that. So if we could go to the next slide. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the transition to college as a student with a disability, and particularly for students who have had 504 plans or IEPs in high school. So high school and college are very different, obviously, in just about every way, and that includes the ways in which disabled students access the services and supports that they need. So the link that we have here on the screen, which I will also put in the chat if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, there we go. And then also that QR code that's up there goes to the same link. This has a really, really detailed overview of the differences. And I'm also going to explain a few of what I think are the most important ones. So the first is that of the laws that govern disabled students' rights and responsibilities. So the three laws that I'm going to talk about are Section 504, IDEA, and the ADA. Section 504 covers both K-12 schools and it covers colleges, post-secondary institutions, but the rules are a little bit different. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, this is the law that governs the creation and maintenance of IEPs, individualized education plans, which some of you or your students may have, or your children may have had. That only applies to K-12 and does not apply to college. Instead, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, applies to colleges instead of the IDEA. And again, the rules there are different. The main differences between all of these are, one, that accommodations and services in high school are mainly meant to help ensure disabled students' success in school. So they're meant to help ensure that you get to that finish line, that you get to graduation. While accommodations in college are mainly meant to help ensure equal access to education. So these are very different. Equal access to education means that students with disabilities have the same opportunity as their non-disabled peers to participate and benefit from all of the college's programs and services that we offer. So everyone gets the same fair shot to succeed or fail. We can't ensure that you will be successful, that you're going to pass every class, but the accommodations that you're provided should level the playing field so that you have the same shot as everyone else, so that your starting line is the same starting line as the person next to you, right? And not 3 steps behind that person. It's still up to you to get to that finish line. The other main difference is that in K-12, services and accommodations are designed to meet individual needs and may include modifications to academic standards or alterations to a curriculum. And colleges, by contrast, are not required to provide services that would result in a major or fundamental, modification or alteration of a standard or curriculum. What does this actually mean? So what this means is if the application of any given accommodation would fundamentally alter, change a curriculum, a standard, a learning objective in a class, the way in which the class is structured, then that accommodation may not be considered applicable in certain situations. So an example of this would be someone who has a disability that significantly impacts their ability to do public speaking, so like presentations and the like, might have an accommodation that excuses them from presenting in front of the class. But if that student takes a class where one of the learning objectives is to learn public speaking skills, then that accommodation is most likely not going to be considered applicable in that situation. So I hope that makes sense. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. The other major piece about the transition that I want to highlight is the shift in responsibility. So in K-12, it is mainly the responsibility of the school and the parents or guardians to advocate for the student, put together that educational plan, whether it's a 504 or an IEP, and make sure that it's being implemented. In college, by contrast, we can't even talk to your parents about you without your consent. So you, the student, are responsible for reaching out to us, self-identifying to us as a student with a disability, and following our process for setting up accommodations. We will walk you through that process, and I'll talk about it a little bit so you don't have to know the whole thing off the top of your head. But you do have to take that first step. It doesn't just happen. Your high school is not going to send us your 504 plan. You need to submit your documentation to us, meet with us directly, and be ready to discuss what your individual needs are. That is what allows us to come up with a plan in conjunction with you for what accommodations and supports are going to be necessary for you in college. So that leads me into the next topic, which is, what is our process? Yeah, thank you. So here is a basic overview of our process for setting up accommodations. We use a software called Accommodate for managing most of our accommodation stuff. And you will be able to have, as a student, your own, excuse me, student portal that you can log into and do a bunch of different tasks from. So the first step is to gather and submit documentation of your disabilities. And here you can see our general guidelines for what documentation should look like. I'll discuss more about the residential accommodation requirements on the next slide. And then meet with us to discuss your needs from your perspective. So that includes what the specific impacts of your disability are for you, what accommodations you've used in the past, what you anticipate you might need as you start college. These first two steps can be done in any order. You don't have to have submitted your documentation to meet with us. So just know that. And then once we have done those first two steps and reached a determination about accommodations, you'll sign an accommodation agreement, which is an internal record between you and OSA about what accommodations have been agreed to. This accommodation agreement is not shared with faculty. And then every semester, preferably at the beginning of the semester, you will do a process called submitting a semester request, which is a request for your current professors for the current semester to be informed about your accommodations. This is what officially activates your accommodations for that semester. Your professors will not know what your accommodations are until you do that step. So once you do that step, your professors will then receive a formal letter stating what your accommodations are. You will also receive a copy of that letter. And at that point, it's highly, highly recommended that you meet with your professors to discuss what your accommodations will look like in each class, because they can really look different from class to class. And I think it's really important to have an understanding ahead of time as to how to handle things that may come up in each of your classes. One important thing to know about having conversations with your faculty is that you do not at any point have to disclose to them what your disability is. That is legally protected information and they do not need to know it. Also, OSA is available to assist with any conversations with faculty, with any disputes that come up with them about your accommodations. So please, truly, like if something doesn't seem right about your interactions with faculty, even if you're not totally sure, please reach out to us and we can help. Other steps that may be needed depending on what accommodations you have could include scheduling your exams with OSA, accessing a set of classroom notes, accessing ebooks, and you'll receive information and instruction about how to do those things if they apply to you. Next slide. And then I also want to highlight one really super important deadline we have coming up this summer, which is our residential accommodation deadline. So if you anticipate that you may need a housing accommodation, the deadline for incoming new students to Lewis and Clark to have finished setting up these accommodations with OSA in order to be guaranteed access to those accommodations is June 16th. So what that means is you need to have submitted your documentation to us and met with us by that date in order to be guaranteed access to those housing accommodations on day one when you step onto campus. We can still process new accommodations after that date, but it just might get you, it might take a little bit more time to get you into the type of housing that you need. The exceptions to this deadline are emotional support animals and meal plan accommodations. We can really process those anytime. But this would be if there's anything in particular about the features of the housing that you live in that you anticipate needing, such as limiting the number of roommates that you have, living on a ground floor, elevator accessible building, housing that doesn't require going up and down as many flights of stairs to get to it, things like that. And then the other important thing to remember is that we ask for a specific piece of documentation for housing accommodations. It's called the Residential Accommodation Documentation Form. Let me drop that one in the chat as well, just so that you all have access to it. Hopefully you should all be able to see that. I hope that the access permissions are set correctly. So this is a form that your licensed medical or mental health provider needs to complete, not you, your provider. It asks specific questions that we need to have answered in order to be able to consider and approve housing accommodations. So again, if you anticipate that you might need a housing accommodation, please engage in this process prior to the 16th of June. And then for academic accommodations, these can be arranged at any point in your educational career, but it is important to keep in mind that process can take time to complete and that accommodations cannot be applied retroactively. So if you haven't set up your accommodations yet and you have a flare up of a chronic illness and you miss several classes, once you set up your accommodations, we can't mandate that your professors excuse you from missing the classes that you missed in the past before your accommodations were set up. So just keep that in mind. There are also some deadlines each semester related to things like scheduling your finals, requesting accessible furniture, sending your accommodation letters to professors, things like that. And that's because those things take time to set up. And at some point in the semester, it can become too late to do that. Next slide. So I am going to include a link to the section of our website that has a list of some of our common accommodations in case you want to peruse that. And then if we could put it in the chat as well, that'd be great. It looks like Melanie is able to put most of those links in the chat. So thank you, Melanie. So this list is not exhaustive and accommodations are highly, highly individualized to each student based on what your needs are and what your documentation says. But it's just so you can kind of get an idea of what's out there. I think the next slide is Katie.
Thank you, Stephanie. Melanie, you can go ahead to the next one. So Stephanie's walked you through process and deadlines, and we thought it may be helpful to summarize, with the months ahead of you between now and fall, what are some things that will be helpful to get started on this summer and maybe get started on right away. So first, set up your accommodations. As Stephanie explained, doing so can take a little time, whether it's getting your provider to fill out a form or meeting with us, and sometimes we need a little more information or have follow-up questions. So do yourself a favor and book a meeting, especially if you're looking to secure the housing accommodations that have that June 16th deadline.
Hey, Katie.
Katie, go ahead.
Really quick. I think we're not sharing screens anymore. I don't think we can see the slides. Is that true?
I can see it.
Okay. Maybe I'm just, okay, never mind.
Good to check. Second, if possible, if your last psychoeducational testing was over 5 years ago, it could be helpful to set up testing again this summer. Doing so at home with, providers who know you, it will likely be easier than trying to do that after you've moved to college. So that's something we just put in there in case, especially if it's been a while since you've had some testing, it could be really helpful to have an updated information there. Third, we recommend setting a game plan as a family, ideally, or maybe also in collaboration with some providers if you're working closely with, say, a therapist or a coach, working through the website that Stephanie shared about the major transitions from high school to college. This is just going to ensure that you have a game plan for how you'll tackle those, various transition pieces. So I'll give a common example that comes up. I've noticed a lot of students in high school talk about how they had one centralized website or portal, and in that portal, they could track all the deadlines for every class. That's often how they submitted work. They could also see their grade at any given moment, and they could message their faculty through there. It was like very centralized, gave them reminders, and oftentimes their parents had access. In college or at Lewis and Clark, we have some tools like that, but not all professors use them, or they don't all use them in the same way. And so as a student, it's a lot more on your shoulders to manage what's due when you have class, right? It's different for each student. So there are things there that I think is really good to strategize about, of like, how will I manage my calendar? How will I manage my due dates? Especially if you don't have that kind of centralized portal or a centralized portal that your parent also sees. So talking through those things ahead of time is a lot more, you're just going to feel prepared for the start of the semester versus the semester starting and then realizing, oh, shoot, there are these things I didn't even know that would be different. And now I'm trying to adapt on the fly. So that website we shared is a really good starting place for having some of those conversations as a family. And finally, develop a wellness plan, with your natural supports, and maybe identify what professional supports you'll need to replicate here in Portland. For example, if you regularly see a specialist or a therapist or a particular kind of therapist or a certain kind of subject tutor, maybe spend some time this summer identifying who you'll transition to or what resources at Lewis and Clark will replicate what has worked really well for you up till this point. You can go to the next slide, Melanie. So wellness planning, in fact, is such an important step that we then gave it its own slide with some more details. So finding new healthcare providers, as you likely know, takes time. So that would be a great item to put on your summer list. Start by contacting your insurance company for current providers in the Portland area, or maybe providers local to you, but they're licensed to do telehealth or virtual appointments in Oregon. And if you feel stuck at any point, we've included here a website about off-campus referrals with some more information, as well as the name and contact information of our case manager, Gabby Herman. And in addition to just being an all-around amazing, warm, welcoming person, Gabby really specializes in working with students to identify resources and referrals. You can work with Gabby and say, here's my insurance, here's what I'm looking for, here's the kind of specialist I need, and she can help identify some providers to contact. Gabby is available through mid-June, and then she'll be away until mid-August. She's a 10-month employee, so I just share that further encouragement to contact her sooner, not later, if this is the kind of assistance you think might be helpful in preparation for fall. And you can go to the next slide, Melanie. We are finishing here. We're going to have some time for Q&A now, but we're finishing with a slide of just our contact information as an office, our email address, and we have a QR code there for our homepage, which has all kinds of information we've talked about today and websites specific to incoming students. But if you can't find what you need or you have questions, by all means, contact us. And then I think we can open it up for some Q&A from all of you. And Stephanie and I prepared some common questions we get from families as well, so we can play around with that if we want to.
I meant to type an answer to that first question that came in, but I hit the wrong button. So I will answer it live.
Why don't you, I'll ask it, you answer live, and then I'll answer it in the chat as well in case that works better.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so Stephanie, does the ESA form, so an emotional support animal form, need to be completed each year if you have an ESA?
Great question. The residential accommodation documentation form does not need to be completed each year for an ESA unless for some reason that accommodation is approved as just like an interim accommodation, which means year to year. Most of the time ESAs are not approved only as a temporary accommodation. They're usually permanent. So that is not necessary, but there is, once you are approved for an ESA, there is a registration form for your specific animal that we do ask you to fill out each year just to make sure that the information that we have about your animal is up to date.
Great. You talked faster than I could type. I thought I could type fast enough. But you said there's a registration form. Yes, you should fill it.
Yes.
Well, I'll ask another question that's here about, are there private spots on campus to have telehealth conversations?
There are, yes. I just Googled that when that question came through, and I will put information in the chat. So okay, I just put information in the chat. So there are Zoom rooms on this page. This is a health promotion and wellness webpage. So this is not our office. This is a different office. But if you scroll down a little bit on that page, you'll see a heading that says update. Zoom rooms have moved. So there are private spots to have telehealth appointments on campus.
Yeah, and I would just like to take a quick moment to put a little plug in for our June 10th webinar, which is all about health and wellness on campus. So we will have, actually Gabby Herman will be on that call. So if you have questions that you think Gabby Herman might be a good person to ask about, or you just want to see who Gabby is and get to know some of those resources that we have regarding health, our health center, our counseling center, and a little bit about our health promotion and wellness office. They will all be on our June 10th webinar. So,
Steph, I'll ask this one of Steph. Stephanie, is it possible to have things added to the accommodation, such as note-taking when absent? And how would I do that?
Great question. So I think what this question is asking is after I initially set up my accommodations, if I realize later on that there are some additional accommodations that I need, can I add those? Let me know if that's not the case, if that's not what you're asking. But yeah, the answer to that is yes. Your accommodations are not set in stone. You can change and update them at any time. There is like sort of an official process through our Accommodate software system for doing that. It's called a supplemental request. But you don't, I mean, you can just make an appointment with us. You don't have to worry about those intricate steps. So yeah, anytime.
Someone asked, are there 24-hour emergency mental health crisis help? The answer is yes. I'm going to answer in the Q&A with the website for the Student Counseling Center. And in addition to offering their hours and information about the Counseling Center, you scroll down just a bit, they have 24/7 mental health emergency like numbers you can call, crisis support numbers. So I'm going to add that here, but I just want to mention live that that is also a option. Can campus mental health providers prescribe ADHD medication?
I believe that there are a couple providers on campus who can, but it is pretty limited. I don't believe that our folks in the counseling center are able to do that, but there is a part-time like campus psychiatrist who can. But like I said, that's pretty limited. If you need to make sure that you have access to somebody, I would probably recommend trying to find someone off campus. I don't know. Is there going to be a webinar about the health center, Melanie? Okay, great.
Yeah, the June 10th webinar will have members from the health center. I
Cool.
know that our nurse practitioners can prescribe medications. I don't know about like the first time, like being diagnosed with something and prescribing a medication. But generally many of the prescriptions go to an off-campus pharmacy oftentimes anyway. So
Yeah.
we don't have a ton of like medications on campus that student can just go pick up in that way, if that was what the question was about. But if you would like more information about that, I would encourage you to attend the webinar on June 10th. Kind of
Well,
pause.
Stephanie, I was gonna say, I could ask Stephanie and I can ask some of the questions of each other that we prepared. But were you gonna say something else, Melanie?
I was gonna say, do you want me to go to the our little FAQs? Let's do it.
Okay. Stephanie, I had a 504 plan or IEP in high school. Will this automatically transfer to college?
No, it will not. We discussed this earlier in the presentation, but these things do not automatically get transferred to us. You need to reach out to us, you, the student. You need to submit your documentation and you need to self-identify to OSA that you are a student with a disability and you need accommodations.
Yeah.
Katie, I'll ask you a question. Do I need to
Great.
attend the meeting with OSA or can my parent or guardian do it for me?
Your parent or guardian cannot do it for you because remember it's partly about the documentation you submit. It's also about the conversation you have with OSA and talking about the specific barriers you experience and what your experience has been. And that's such a critical second part. So no, someone else cannot do that for you. Stephanie, my documentation is more than 5 years old. Will you still accept it?
Great question. It depends. I would say we are not quite so focused on getting recent documentation as we are on getting current documentation. And by that, I mean documentation that does a good job of describing what your current needs are. So it could be that your documentation from when you were 10 years old about your lifelong condition does pretty much match what your current needs are, or it could be that things have changed significantly since then. So think about that when you're thinking about what to submit. If in doubt, please feel free to submit whatever you've got anyway, and we can review it and discuss it with you.
Great. Will I have a case manager or an academic advisor who checks in with me regularly?
That's a very good question. It's a pretty common thing, I think, especially for students who had 504s or IEPs in high school, to have somebody that meets with you regularly and who checks in with you, is monitoring your progress. Unfortunately, that's not really a thing in college. We do have advisors. So you have an academic advisor for your major, you have a college advisor, but again, that shift in responsibility to you, the student. Those folks are not going to come and find you during your math class if you don't make an appointment with them or you don't respond to their emails. So it's not the same type or level of support that there might have been in high school.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, I think we kind of got a question about this in the actual Q&A, so let's go to this. I need to meet with someone regularly to help me with organization, managing deadlines, executive function, etc. How do I do that?
Like most colleges, Lewis and Clark has a lot of academic resources. Tutoring, quantitative skills center, a writing center, librarians are extremely helpful. Faculty office hours should not be overlooked as far as being extremely helpful with classes. You can meet, every other week or so with your advisor. Maybe couple that with checking in with a person in OSA fairly regularly. And as Melanie says, we do have workshops about academic organization. We do not, though, have like weekly or bi-weekly executive functioning coaches available. I know that's a very specific thing that some students ask about or have utilized in high school. And if you have really found it helpful up to this point to have that regular executive functioning specialized coaching, I've certainly worked with students who have accessed that resource outside of Lewis and Clark. Sometimes the coach, the executive functioning coach, is really helpful just for helping you access the resources Lewis and Clark does have. Setting up the tutoring appointment, setting up the meeting with the advisor, making sure your calendar is organized such that you remember to go, and you can keep track of all your assignments. So it's a yes and. We have quite a lot, but I guess I'd clarify a little bit from Melanie's answer that for executive functioning coaching, that specific really regular coaching, we do not have that exact resource. We have a lot of other things that are very helpful though with academics. I guess you're going to maybe ask me the next one.
Yeah, I'll ask you this one. I suspect that I might have a diagnosis that I've never been tested for. How do I access testing for this?
This would be, I don't know how hard it is, Melanie, for you to kick back to slide 14, but this would be maybe setting up that appointment with Gabby Herman. That's accessing kind of referrals that you're interested in maybe getting some psychoeducational testing. So in addition to finding providers in the Portland area, Gabby can also help with the question of, I think I'd like to get some psychoeducational testing or some a diagnosis I've been a little suspicious that I have, and I'd like to get some help around that. Gabby's a great resource if you'd like to get tested for that. Stephanie, I had accommodations in high school, but I'd like to try not having them in college. Can I do that? Do you recommend that?
Sure, you can do it. Should you? Some students do this. Some people really want that fresh start, and maybe in some cases it goes well. And also maybe in some cases it doesn't go well. And maybe you realize that there was a very good reason that those accommodations were there in high school. So it is up to you, the student. You're totally in control of your destiny here. If you're not sure, if you want to use accommodations to start out with, I would say what we recommend is setting them up with us. But then if you recall the part of my presentation where I talked about the semester request, the part where you inform your professors about your accommodations, once you've set up your accommodations, they're just sitting there waiting for you to activate them each semester. So you get to decide every semester whether or not that happens. And it's better to have them there, I think, to activate should you need them than to not have set them up at all, realize halfway through the semester that you need them, and then have to go through the entire process of setting them up. That's my recommendation.
I agree. Other questions from folks?
I was gonna say something about the person who asked, can parents attend the OSA meeting and have the student lead? And Katie, you answered yes. I just want to say before you start school here, that is completely fine. Parents can attend any of the meetings with their students. Once students start classes, we do need to then have students sign that release of information form, or a release of information form that's specific to our office to allow us to communicate with parents. So at the point at which students start attending their classes, that's when FERPA, the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act, I think is what that stands for. That's when that kicks in. And that's when we can't share information with parents without permission. So, but before that, over the summer, anytime, no permission needed.
Any other final questions? Got through a lot today. Thanks for sticking with us. Okay, Katie, Stephanie, do either of you want to give any final thoughts or farewells?
Oh, it looks like there's one more question that came in. I did want to put in the chat I think we didn't put the links to like our intake form and our student login link. So I would like to do that really quick. So I can stick these in the chat. Here is our intake form. This is the first step to requesting accommodations. And then once you've submitted an intake form, you can then log into your student account with Accommodate. Use your Lewis and Clark ID or yeah, email address and password to log in. And that is where you do that. And that's where you can make an appointment, submit additional documentation, do a bunch of different things. So and
And
then yeah, where do you get access to the FERPA? So there's an institutional release form, which I am not the best person to answer where you get access to that. But the one that's specific to our office, the student just needs to request that we send it to them so that they can sign it. So just have them email us or contact us and we can send it to them.
I did see a question in the chat that I missed. That was where to find a recording of this webinar, and it should be up by the end of this week. If not by the end of this week, then on Monday we'll get it up there, and you can find it on our website if you just search new student webinars. You should find a page where we will be keeping all of the recordings of all of these webinars, and you can also access last year's webinars in case you're eager to see what might come up. And yeah, I think I see somebody has a raised hand if they wanted to drop a question in the chat or in the Q&A if that's possible. I don't know if it's we have the capability to unmute people in the webinar format. But also, if you're not able to put a question in there, you're welcome to send an email to any of us. We have access@lclark.edu to get in contact with OSA, and then first year at lclark.edu if you want to get in contact with our office. And I think with that, we will conclude our webinar here. Like I mentioned, our next webinar is happening on June 10th, Tuesday, June 10th at the same time, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we will have members from the health center, the student health center, student counseling center, and some overview of our health promotion and wellness office, as well as Gabby Herman that you heard mentioned, who is wonderful, and she will be representing case management on that webinar as well. Again, we will record all of these if you're not able to attend, but we would love to see you, and you're welcome to join so that you can ask your questions and get answers live while we're here. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. If you need anything or you have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we're here.
Bye, thank you.